It's hard to be the economic engine of the province when people and goods are routinely stuck in traffic. It's been a provincial and municipal priority for long enough that it's often gotten tangled up in the politics of the day. Can we finally see some light at the end of this transportation tunnel for the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area? Well, let's ask. In Boston, Massachusetts, Matty Simyaticki. He's a professor of geography and planning at the University of Toronto. And here in our studio, Cherise Berta, executive director of the Ryerson City Building Institute. Jeff Casello, professor of transportation planning and engineering at the University of Waterloo. And we welcome back Phil Verster, president and CEO of Metrolinx. Great to have you guys back here in our studio. Matty, I guess a conference has taken you down to Beantown?
Yes, it's great to be with you today.
Excellent. Too bad there's no Red Sox baseball happening while you're there, but that's just me. Okay, here we go. Let's bring this up, shall we? Sheldon, here are some of the facts that we're going to get into over the next little while here. The Greater Toronto Area, and that, of course, is the old city of Toronto, inner suburbs, Durham, Halton, Peel, York region. They are projecting, not surprisingly, to be the fastest growing region of the province in the years ahead. The population is set to increase by almost 3 million people, or 42%, in roughly the next quarter century. And as we continue, in 2011, Torontonians reported taking more than half an hour to get from home to work. That is the longest average travel time of any city in Canada. Congestion, they estimate, cost the GTHA $6 billion annually in lost productivity. By the year 2031, that is expected to be a loss of $15 billion annually, if you can imagine, because of congestion. So, Matty, let's get into this. What, in your view, are the most glaring weaknesses in our transportation infrastructure in the GTHA today?
Well, to get us started, I think the good news is that the region is growing and we're a prosperous region. The bad news is it's brought a lot of congestion and we're choking on it. Our transit system hasn't kept pace over the past number of decades. It's hard to get around by public transit. It's hard and sometimes dangerous to get around by cycling and by walking. And the roads are packed with construction and other barriers in place as well. So it's just become really hard to get around our region. And we're struggling with how to unlock the gridlock.
Cherise, what would you add to that in terms of what we're really lacking and missing right now?
I would say, in addition to that, we're lacking long-term dedicated funding. And I could go into some of the details, and I will, about how our transit plan, which we have in place by 2041, keeps us treading water. But we don't actually catch up and get ahead where we are. And we're not going to be able to do that until we have long-term dedicated revenue. And that means things like raising taxes. And if you look at any city in North America or Europe that is very successful at building out its transit system from the core out for the long term and meets all of its needs, well, they all raise dedicated revenue, either through a sales tax or congestion charging. And until we get serious about that, we're going to keep treading water.
You may be right, but you just lost the next election, right? I mean, that's a difficult thing to ask politicians to raise taxes right now, isn't it?
That's part of all of the political shenanigans that we see going on when it comes to transit.
That is part of political leadership, and we'll get to that later. What would you add to that, Jeff?
I think there's two structural problems. One is, first, the physical network that we run. It is still concentrated on Union Station. All of our GO lines feed there. All of our transit lines in the city still focus on a single core. And yet the city has grown so much that there's multiple cores throughout the region, and we're not really thinking systematically about how we are going to connect those in a long-term vision. The other structural problem is we have too many layers of planning and too much layers of design, too much layers of long-term thinking. We've got the province, we've got Metrolinx with respect, we've got the City of Toronto, we've got TTC, we've got 10 transit providers. There's too many actors without any lead and without any systematic vision for what the region should look like 40 years from now.
Can I just understand, when you said even what we've got going right now, we're just treading water, even with $34 billion that he's got on the books, we're just treading water.
That just catches us up. So if you look at the numbers, I looked at some analysis that Pamela Blaze has done, and she's one of the top planners in the region. And she showed that the mode shift, or the mode split of the percentage of people who will be getting to work by taking transit, it barely moves the needle. It goes from 14.2% to 14.7%. And what's even worse is that we're going to be adding 3 million more car trips every day during peak hours by 2040. 41. And that's simply because we're building a lot of transit, but that's to serve the sort of growing population that's going to take transit. We're not building enough to actually make that shift across the region.
Your $34 billion apparently is only going to let us tread water. What do you think of that?
And I think Cherise and Jeff are both absolutely right. The importance of the investment is that we are catching up and we are creating the infrastructure that's necessary for what must follow. Speaking specifically to Jeff's point, the solutions cannot be a traditional solution that runs into union only. We have to create what I call network effects. Smart Track is an example of a network effect. LRTs such as Eglinton are network effects, where you create options and opportunities for interconnection on other parts of the network, interfacing to GO stations. We should get many more people traveling on the Barrie line that wants to get off on an intermediate station. Currently, about 88% of our passengers and customers have Union as end destination. And when we have more interconnection options and more active traveling and more of a focus on mobility rather than infrastructure, then we'll go in the right direction. And I think the long-term plan must be all about mobility rather than how many spades do we put in the ground and how many new hard touchable stuff we're building.
Maddie, I want to raise with you this notion that we're catching up now, but that many years ago we had experienced what they called the golden age of Toronto transportation infrastructure. I guess it's researcher Stephen Wickens who said this place once upon a time was really a marvel for the rest of the world. Was that in fact the case?
I think it's in some ways a dangerous myth. We built a lot of transit, and the best part of our system was the way that we integrated different modes of transportation together at the station areas. So you can take a streetcar or a bus directly into the TTC station, into the subway, and then get on the subway and go from there. So the way that the system was integrated is second to none worldwide. But I think where the challenges lie is that there's this myth that this was really always evidence-based, but yet we often didn't include the public in decision-making, and so we had adverse impacts in terms of the type of infrastructure we built. Sometimes building too much, sometimes damaging communities in which infrastructure went through. So I think it's important to understand that there was a period between the 1950s and 1980s where we built a lot, but we didn't necessarily tick all the top priorities, and now we're playing catch-up trying to fill the backlog.
Well, we have a graphic amplifying on what you just said, Maddie. Here we go, Sheldon, top of page 3. From 1950 to 1980, the population of the GTA grew by about 2 million people, and 400 kilometers worth of commuter rail track was built to service that population. You look at the next 3 decades, however, from 1980 to 2010, the population doubled to 6 million, and we laid 43 kilometers of track over that period of time. Cherise, why so little over that 3-decade period?
Wow, how do I get started? I mean, we haven't caught up, and I think a lot of that comes down to governance. It comes down to politics. It comes down to the fact that we haven't had the right governance structure in place or the authority for Metrolinx to build what we're actually planning. We just keep drawing more lines on map. For example, I went to, I've got a binder that's this thick from Metrolinx, which describes the business case methodology for evidence-based planning. It's great, it's fantastic. I spent two hours learning about it. What's the point? If you're going to have a politician come along and say, I don't care about that evidence, the only evidence I care about is how I'm going to get voted by building this piece of infrastructure over here. So we need to think about how we're making decisions. I'm not an expert on governance models, but I do know that we need to create some sort of authority, perhaps, for Metrolinx through the Metrolinx Act to ensure that the decisions that we are making that are evidence-based actually get put in place.
Well, since you've gone here, and we touched on this, Phil, in our conversation earlier, let's keep going here. And you get to sit tight for a second and listen to what everybody else has got to say. Okay, this is obviously a... Look, it's a push-me-pull-you type of thing here, right? I mean, the politicians are the deciders. Sure. The politicians flow the money, but the politicians are not the experts. These guys are the experts. They put forward the information, and the politicians, as we've seen over the last many years, often disregard that information. What do we do about this?
Well, one thing we can do, there's two things we can do. Certainly, we can work on the decision-making process so we can see it, so it's open and transparent. And I know Maddie could talk for hours about exactly how to do that. But there's something more, Steve. There are transit agencies and cities and regional planning organizations that have the power to tax globally. And this is an incredibly important point. Transport for London, all of the revenues that come from the transport system come back to Transport for London.
This is London, UK?
London, UK. Mm-hmm. They make the decisions about how to invest that money. And they don't make a decision between a competing transit project. They can decide between a transit project, a freeway project, a cycling project, or an arterial project. This gives them the real domain to make important changes in the region.
So that's a governance issue in effect.
It's a governance structure, but it's a financing structure, both of those things. When congestion charging came to London, there was lots of concern about it. And what's happened is the money has been directly put back into the system so that bus service got much better. Travel time by buses is down by 30 or 40%. Retail has felt no influence inside the city. They're still generating the same level of economic activity. So if you empower a well-designed, well-structured organization to make comprehensive decisions for a region, you're going to have a much more successful. Metrolinx, with respect, again, it's completely hamstrung. I mean, it is trying to make decisions without any funding mechanism of its own. And so basically you have to go to the province and say, we think these are the priorities, which do you think are the priorities, and how shall we fund them? And that's where the disconnect happens.
Phil, you don't get to talk yet. Maddie, I want to go to you and find out, in your judgment, how often do the empirically provable facts which suggest a certain plan of attack carry the day, versus how often a politician wants a subway station in his or her backyard, and therefore politics carries the day? What's the ratio in your estimation?
There's some interesting figures on this point, and it's based on Metrolinx business cases, and it seems like it's about half and half in our region. But the big issue is that it's on the major infrastructure investments, the Scarborough subways, projects of that scale, the Gardiner Expressway, where we're really making costly mistakes and going against the evidence. I think the key is that you set up governance systems that give the responsibility to each party. So the politicians, I think their role is really to set the overarching priorities, and then let the planners and let the civil service independently assess the different options and come up with the solutions that work best. Then the politicians can come back in and try to make sense of the data, consult with the public, and then try to make decisions. But in our context, we have politicians meddling in evidence making, and it's leading to some really perverse outcomes.
Okay, Phil, give us the benefit of your experiences from other places where you worked outside this country. How often do politics render, the decision that's made, and how often is it based on the facts?
I think that in any democratic jurisdiction, and when I say democratic jurisdiction, talk about what you see in Western Europe and what you see here, you will always have that tension between what the elected representatives that represent the needs and make the policy and needs of the communities, what they decide and how they decide on what they think their priorities should be. And I think what happens over time is systems develop their own sort of momentum to understand what works best and what doesn't work best. And I think debates such as this helps to inform how we need to think about where we go in the future. The challenge for me and my team is to work within the system we have. And when we think about transport solutions, we have a singular focus on the customer. And we have a singular focus to, within that domain space we've got, to work as hard as possible, as effectively and as smartly as possible to deliver the solutions we need. I think this type of debate is extremely important because it'll help us to set the right priorities and come up with the right solutions in the long term. In the short term, where we are today is an urgent need to get stuff in the ground, to get solutions across our communities, such as integrated fares, and to get, as Cherie said, real momentum behind a strong long-term plan.
Okay, but you're talking about operating within the system as it exists now.
Yeah.
My hunch is these two think that the system needs to be blown up because it's not working. Am I putting words in your mouth, or is that?
Or modified.
Or modified. Okay, blown up is a little too strong. It's a bit of a Trumpian word there. I should have just gone with modified. But that gets to what you're referring to. Yeah. Jeff?
Here's a simple example. You may elect to implement, let's use Eglinton, you're building Eglinton now. And But the City of Toronto or any jurisdiction can approve any development anywhere without any consideration of the fact that you've just made this multi-billion-dollar investment in transportation capacity. So if we're going to build a new mall, if we're going to build a new high-rise building, it should be consistent with the fact that we've just added all this transportation infrastructure. But because there's this structural divide where land use decisions are made at a different level than Phil's making it, then it's problematic, right? We can make big mistakes because then we can have people who are living in this apartment building saying, well, I don't have any public transport. Well, the decision isn't, it's not Metrolinx's fault that there's not public transport there. It's the decision to build the building there. And this is the kind of cohesion that we don't have in the GTA.
And Jeff, sorry, Cherise, you go first.
I was just going to say a couple of things. With due respect, the customer's impact is felt by the decisions that we make. So we need to get that better for their experience. But I agree with you. There's a disconnect with, we've got a growth plan that was just released this year, and we have a transit plan. They say nice things about each other in them, but they're actually not sitting down and carefully looking at where are we putting the transit lines, where is growth happening, where is development going? And I think in this sort of political fairness, to try and spread transit around the region like peanut butter, we end up starving out the center of our city that is starving from transit. Like, for example, our overloaded Yonge line. We've needed a downtown relief line forever. Sidewalk Labs and Google, they are going to invest $50 million in planning an amazing city that, you know, checks all the boxes. It's retail, it's at the next commercial zone. They're looking at no cars.
No cars.
That's one of my favorite box to check.
I thought it would be, yeah.
There's all kinds of things going on there: education, innovation, climate resilience. Where's the waterfront LRT? It's at the bottom of the list in the Metrolinx
So
queue.
the priorities are backwards.
And it's because we're not looking at where the development is going, where the growth is going, and looking at our city building goals. Those should be done in conjunction with our transit planning.
We keep hearing that I know the Mayor of Toronto doesn't like to call it a downtown relief line because he feels that excludes the inner suburbs, but let's call it a Yonge Street relief line, as he uses the language. That's been priority number one for ages, and it feels like nothing's happening on it. Do you want to disabuse us of that notion?
And it is in the regional transportation plan. And picking up on Cherise's point, we have used the provincial growth model as the basis for the regional transportation plan. And still, I have to agree with everyone on the panel, there are always new ways of formulating governance, new ways of formulating decisions that can get us to a better outcome. And Cherise is right. Consequences of what we do now can affect how customers experience the transportation choices we make. We have to also just think, and I'm not defending where the decision-making is currently. I'm pretty agnostic to where we are currently because I'm sort of starting to understand how decisions are made. But we have to understand that there is sort of also the free enterprise system of people making decisions. I've been at Eglinton and I've seen the amount of investment that happens around that line now, because that transit solution is becoming a reality and closer into people's awareness. And you can clearly see that the city is evolving around that development. But Cherise is right. We need strategic direction that sort of makes sense, and that, with all of the uncertainty of what the future looks like, is something we can work with.
Let's see if you agree with what Maddie is about to suggest. And Maddie, to that end, I want you to tell us about an idea, share with us the idea that you've got a colleague at Oxford University who says, apparently, that if politicians want to mess with empirically provable facts that civil servants have brought forward, maybe we should take a new approach. You want to share that with us?
Sure. So this is my colleague Ben Fluberg at Oxford University, who's been covering cost overruns on mega projects for decades now. And he's come to the conclusion that the main way we're going to stamp out this trend is to make significant consequences, both professional consequences and potentially criminal consequences in cases where data is manipulated and misrepresented. And so this tries to come head on at the problem that there's a lack of transparency, but also in secrecy, there can be misrepresentations in the way that information is used. Now, keep in mind, these are for projects that are worth many billions and billions of dollars. I'm sitting here in Boston today. The Big Dig project went through, and as they started to do the autopsy, the financial autopsy of why this project went so far over budget, what they found is that there was a lack of transparency in how information was being released and who was being told about the updated costs. So these have major consequences for cities and for taxpayers, and I think when data is being manipulated, there needs to be stern consequences.
Okay, you thought Cherise was right about a number of things. Do you think Maddie is right about the idea of throwing politicians in jail if they fudge the facts?
Is this the part where I can leave the panel then?
This is the part where you have to answer the question.
Look, in Metrolinx, we are taking big steps to increase transparency and improve transparency. We'll publish minutes from confidential board meetings, and we're having, next week, we're having an announcement on that in the public domain. I think transparency and a way of working that is adhered to and that consistently places clarity on who does what and who makes what decision is the starting point. When Matty talks there and talks about consequences that affect behaviour, that's a different discussion. For me, all of us understand there are consequences of our decisions. And on our domain side of the fence, we're just passionate about moving people. You know, this is what matters to us. And we want the elected officials to make good decisions because they are, in the end, they're accountable back to the electorate.
Jeff, let me put this to you, and that is, I don't want us to be too naive about this and think that this fudging of the facts, as is happening in York Region, is somehow a new thing. You know, 25 years ago, Bob Ray was the premier, and he decided he wanted a subway on Eglinton, which coincidentally would have ended up in his riding. Then Mike Harris won an election and decided to cancel that and create the Shepherd Line, which coincidentally the Conservatives held all those seats up in there. This is the way it's been for a long time.
Yeah, and I think when you think about those kinds of projects where you're trying to deliver something for your constituents, you can understand the political motivation. I think if you were to put it in a bigger picture, and if you were to ask Torontonians whether or not they thought that this $1 billion was spent was the right $1 billion, even though those who voted for that person made that decision, I think you would get a very different answer. And so exposing the process to having, you know, as you've been talking about transparency. So really you can get a very open conversation about whether or not the money, you know, even in Waterloo, we're spending $818 million on our LRT system, and there was lots of consternation. Are we ready for that kind of system? Are we a big enough city for that? And I think that there was very good conversation about it, and ultimately our politicians led. They believed in the technical analysis, and I think, you know, 30 years from now we'll do an autopsy like Maddie describes in Boston, and we'll make a decision about whether or not it was worth it or whether or not, you know, where the mistakes were made. And I think that's the important outcome.
Cherise, let me bring you in on another example that was very high profile, the attempt to build a subway to Scarborough, or from Scarborough to the city, both ways, obviously. The chief planner of the City of Toronto, Jennifer Keesmaat, thought it was a bad idea. It was way too much money for, you know, way too small an impact. The council had a different decision. She spoke out against it. The mayor and she got off on a very bad path as a result of that. How much obligation do you want to put on the heads of civil servants to speak truth to power or speak truth even publicly, even when elected politicians have made decisions?
Well, this comes down to the whole thing that we're talking about. If we're going to have a transit agency with experts that are going to put together binders and provide evidence, if you're going to have a chief planner who is hired because they're an expert and they're going to do the analysis and they're going to say, look, we're going to be spending a lot of money and this isn't going to get us riders. If we're rolling in dough, it would make a big difference. But we have very little money, very little peanut butter spread around. And when she speaks truth to power, I'm thankful for that because somebody has got to talk about what the problem is here. And she's not the only one. I can't think of anyone who hasn't been able to say that this is a bad idea, and yet it continues to go forward strictly for political reasons. So I think that gets into a governance model that enables the truth to power because it creates a system within the governance where the people who are there making these decisions don't have to respond on one-offs. We don't have to send situations to the auditor at an ad hoc level. This should be baked into how we're making decisions.
Jeff, I want to understand better, though, where the lines of responsibility go here. I mean, Keesmaat clearly came out and said it's crazy to spend $4 billion on a one-stop subway to Scarborough, but that's what the politicians wanted, and so she came up with a plan to make it work. How much obligation is there, though, on public servants to speak truth to power and to speak truth to the public.
So I was a public servant also. I worked for 6 years for the state of New York designing highways, and I often was asked to design highways that were going to cost millions of dollars that I wasn't sure was a good idea. And I think, when you work in an organization, you're asked to deliver the product that you are asked to deliver. If you disagree, then there's options for you in terms of your career change. Where I think there's a bigger impact that we have outside of the civil servant, Steve, is with Charisse and with me and with Maddie. I mean, we almost have a responsibility to the GTHA to be vocal and to be loud about the sorts of things and to bring attention to the kinds of things and just bring scrutiny, not necessarily always be critical. When something is thoughtful and done well, we should be as loud and as positive and reinforcing about those things as we can be.
Let me follow up on that then. And Maddie, let me start with you on this. I want to talk just for a few minutes here about Metrolinx, because this is an organization which has an enormous amount of influence and power in making various decisions and recommendations to politicians. And I suspect, Phil, I don't think Ontarians know a damn thing about this organization, frankly. I don't think they know how it was created. I don't think they know who's on it. I don't think they know how they make decisions. That's what's come back to me after a decade of seeing what Metrolinx does. So, Maddie, come on in here and start off a bit of a discussion on this. Why was Metrolinx created in the first place?
Well, Metrolinx was formed to be the independent planning body for transportation in the region. It was meant as an organization that could help stitch together a region that has different municipalities, where transportation issues are very regional and cross municipal boundaries. So Metrolinx was formed as an organization to try to bring this together and bring an expert-led, evidence-led approach, and to try to separate the political from the evidence. And I think that's really where Metrolinx has struggled in terms of the governance. There are great people that work for Metrolinx. Metrolinx has a lot of technical capacity and a lot of people who are passionate about transportation. The issue is that the governance system is posing extremely challenging for them to make expert-led decisions and to separate them from the day-to-day politics. And we've seen that in terms of some of the decisions, most recently the Kirby GO station report.
Right. Now, Jeff, by governance, do we mean there's not enough people on the board at Metrolinx who actually know anything about transportation?
So, I think that this is an important point. When most transit agencies have boards that oversee them, and rarely are there any transportation experts. I think the board has to be comprised of people with all kinds of backgrounds. There should be lawyers, there should be economists, there should be people who understand, but there has to be somebody on the board that understands. There has to be some translation of the issues into the core purpose of the project. I just think a board made up of 13 people, none of whom who have transportation expertise, is problematic.
Phil, that's the knock on the Metrolinx board, that they have no background in transportation at all.
And I would like to just sort of come back on something Matty said and just leave a thought on that. I've started to go through the files and figure out where the business cases work and where they don't work. And I have to say, from what I see in front of us, quite a lot of the business cases, the ones I've seen, work. They do work. Eglinton is a solid investment. Eglinton obviously need the western extension, the eastern extension to make it even more powerful as a business case. So I think to say that Metrolinx struggle inordinately with making business cases work is probably not fully correct, and there's a discussion to be had on that. I think quite a lot of the stuff get into the right zone. And yes, there are issues, but we are resolving the issues that are on the table.
Do you want to weigh in on the effectiveness of Metrolinx?
Well, I would just add that beyond simply planning the evidence case for particular projects, there was the whole investment strategy that Metrolinx developed. It took a number of years. It wasn't just how do you build it, but how do we pay for it? So looked at a whole strategy of raising revenue. And that ended up on the ground. And then we ended up with the Golden Panel, which was ignored.
Ann Golden.
The Ann Golden Panel, transit
forward
plan.
lots of recommendations on tolls and congestion charges. And
that was ignored, and even John Tory's road pricing was shot down. So I think that it's happening at all levels. It's not just Metrolinx, it's happening. The governance challenges are not only with Metrolinx, they're with the provincial government, they're with the municipal government, our ward system, where we go to, we battle with our boxing gloves and we want to defend our turf, and we don't want to do things for the city as a whole. You compare that to Vancouver, for example, and they elect their council at large, and they have surpassed us in the past 20 years. And I'm not saying this is the reason that they've surpassed us, but they have in the last decade, they've built 3 more times transit than we have.
Because their local politicians can think citywide as opposed to so parochially.
Yes, and also they do have their mayors working well together regionally on TransLink to raise revenue. They also raise revenue for it.
I think I could ask Phil directly, I mean, and you probably don't want to answer the question, but if you had the ability to place tolls on Highway 401 tomorrow, and you would have control over the revenue, I mean, in a hierarchical structure, if you really were the independent body that was responsible for planning an organization for the Greater Toronto Area, this would give you incredible discretion in terms
Ask him
of...
the question. Ask him, would you do it? Would you do
I'll
it,
leave
Phil?
that to you, Steve. You're the
Go ahead.
hard-hitting journalist on the panel.
Would you do it, Phil?
I would do it without thinking twice. I mean, obviously, when you have control over revenue, it does change the realm of your decision making, and it allows you a degree of independence.
Would you put congestion charges in downtown Toronto?
Well, those types of choices, I was just going to qualify that. While I would want to do that, we have to accept that the choice of where costs are incurred by the electorate and by people on the street is a choice that should have a very clear ownership with elected leadership. And I think there's always that tension. So what I would like is not necessarily what would be best. Well, do you follow?
Yes.
And there's a discussion to be had over there.
But I would respectfully say that it's all of our roles, those who consider ourselves transportation professionals, to be the advocates for those kinds of things, to push politicians, to ask them the question, if we're not able to do this, why not?
And to at least explore the options and think about
yes.
it and think about what it can do. So
I share
take that.
Cherise's frustration with the Liberal Party. They campaigned on revenue tools. They talked about revenue tools, and as soon as they became in power, and granted politically things are delicate, they abandoned that notion, and it was problematic.
What's the example in London, UK?
I mean,
Red Ken, the mayor, brought it in, and what happened to him next time?
What's really important about congestion charging in London is that was not a transport authority exercising its a right to implement congestion charging, but it was the mayor's initiative.
Exactly.
And that's how it should, and that's where the political responsibility and accountability for that type of decision is absolutely
if you look at
transparent and really important.
Other examples, not necessarily road tolls or congestion charging. You look at Denver, for example, a 4% sales tax that was led by the Regional Economic Development Corporation that are in place to oversee not only the region, the governance of the region, but how to properly execute a transit plan. And they realized that you need to get money to do that.
I got 30 seconds left here. Maddie, let me give it to you. Tell me, if you had one revenue generation idea that you thought you could get through and get public acceptance on, what would it be?
I would do road tolls because I think it raises significant amounts of money, and it also has an impact on travel behavior. We have a lot of spare capacity in the back seats of people's cars. There's a lot of single occupancy vehicles, and once you put a toll on roads, it not just raises revenue, it also encourages people to carpool and change the way they travel. This can help us raise money and also address our congestion issue.
Terrific. Thank you for wrapping it up and putting a bow on it. That's Maddie Simiaticki, Professor of Geography and Planning, U of T. Thanks for being there for us on the line from Boston, Mass. And there's Jeff Casello from the University of Waterloo and Cherise Berta from the Ryerson City Building Institute. And we welcome for the first, I think it's your first television interview, isn't it, since you got the gig?
That was right. Fantastic.
Very
Thank you
good.
very much.
First time on TV here in Canada for Phil Verster, President, CEO, Metrolinx. Thanks so much, everybody. Great discussion. Happy to have you here at TVO tonight.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.